Hello, ocean people! Welcome back to Brent Durand Underwater. This is a channel where I share tips, tricks, and secrets to capturing great video and great underwater photos. I've got a companion website at tutorials.brentdurand.com where you can check out all of these tutorials and all of these settings in written format along with the embedded YouTube videos. So check that out. Today, we're going to talk about the GoPro Hero 9 camera and some of the best settings for shooting underwater video with the GoPro. Now, the GoPro Hero 9 is similar to the GoPro Hero 8 in some of our preset settings, but all the settings we're going to discuss will also apply to other models of the GoPro from the Hero 7 on down. So stay tuned, we're going to share those settings, going to talk about some pro tips for capturing great video, and a few other secrets. Let's get it started. So one important note as we get started here. The GoPro itself is waterproof down to 10 meters or 33 feet, which is awesome. It's really perfect for snorkeling, jumping off cliffs, whatever you're going to do. But if you're going to do serious free diving or any sort of scuba diving, you're going to want to use the protective dive housing because this is depth rated beyond recreational dive depths. So you take the camera, you get that dive housing, you pop it in, and now you're good to go scuba diving. You've got access to the buttons you need on the top and on the side, so you're good to shoot. Always remember, you have to clean the O-ring and the surface that the O-ring contacts to make sure you have no debris in there, sand, eyelash, hair, or anything like that. Now, with the camera in the housing, we are limited on some of the settings and accessing the settings on the back menu. It's plastic, acrylic here. Can't access the cool touch screen, but that's okay. We're gonna set up the camera settings and some of the presets before we get in the water. So let's learn how to do that. Operating the GoPro inside the dive housing is really easy. Simply push the power button to turn on the GoPro and it defaults into video mode, so you can start recording right away. If you push that mode button again, you'll enter photo mode. Push it again, you'll enter time-lapse mode, push it again, and you're back to video mode where you started. So it's really easy to navigate between those modes depending on what you want to shoot. Now, GoPro also has a really cool feature called Quick Capture. And what this does is if the camera is off, it allows you to simply push the record button or the shutter button on top of the housing. It wakes the GoPro and defaults into shooting video. So the benefit here for shooting underwater photo and underwater video, particularly with scuba divers who are out doing multiple dives per day, is that you can turn the screen off or program the screen to turn off after just a couple minutes and the camera itself to turn off after just a couple minutes, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. But then if you see some fast action, simply push the record button or that shutter button and the camera will wake up, turn on, and start recording right away. It defaults into video, but you can program Quick Capture to turn on and shoot a still photo if you like. Generally, video is the way to go, but this is a really, really nice setting because it allows you to save battery life while you're diving all day and not miss any of those cool opportunities you want to shoot with the GoPro. Now, before we dive into settings and customizing the camera preferences menus, it's important to note that the GoPro app is the best way to do this. It is extremely easy to go in there, update your camera settings and the camera preferences through your app because you can see exactly what you're doing. It's easier to tap than using the LCD screen on the back of the GoPro. So just a tip, if you want to start setting up your camera that way and go through the initial setup using the app, it's going to be a lot easier. It pairs very easily with the GoPro Hero 9 and also with the GoPro Hero 8 and other models. So I highly suggest that, particularly if this stuff gets pretty confusing for you. That said, if you're out on the dive boat, you can always plug in the app, review your images, and see what you've been shooting, change settings, or you just do it on the back touchscreen. Just make sure to not get the camera wet because if you put it back into the housing, you're going to have moisture inside the housing, which could cause some fogging. So just make sure you have dry hands if you're changing any settings on the boat on the back LCD screen. So what are the best settings for shooting underwater video with the GoPro? Well, basically, if you're shooting the GoPro Hero 9 or the Hero 8, you're going to use the standard preset. Now, this comes default as the standard preset for shooting video with either of these cameras. Now, if you're shooting a different model GoPro, you're going to manually plug in some of the settings we'll be discussing here. But the standard preset comes with default settings that allow you to pick that preset, start shooting, and make it really, really easy for you. So the standard resolution is 1080p, which is really universal. That's most of the content that we're streaming online, that we're viewing on social media. That's all going to be 1080p. So sure, we talk about 2.7K and 4K, even 5K on the new GoPro Hero 9, but do we really need that resolution? Not really. Actually, if you start recording at 4K or 5K, you might find your computer is slow to process it, or that is not compatible with all mobile phones, that you have to have special software on your phone to even view the footage. So I only recommend using 4K or 5K video if you're really comfortable working and editing with those resolutions. Now that standard preset also shoots at 60 frames per second, and that is a great default for online video. Sure, it's not cinema like you'd see in a movie at 24 frames per second, but what it does is generally you will view videos at 30 frames per second online. It's a very common editing sequence standard. So because you're shooting at 60 frames per second, but your end product is 30 frames per second, you can reduce the speed of the video by 50%, and that means slow motion. So if you have a shark swimming by, a turtle, another diver, you can reduce the speed of that and create slow motion by 50%. So that's really cool, and it's a great default with the standard preset. The last thing is that the lens in the standard preset is wide, and I find that to be a great lens for most underwater video. If you go to super view, it might be a little too wide, linear, maybe a little too narrow, so that wide lens is pretty perfect for shooting underwater video. Now, if you start scrolling through the other presets past standard in the Hero 9 or the Hero 8 GoPros, you'll see that there's an activity preset, you'll see cinema, and you'll see slow-mo. Now, I don't really worry about activity or about cinema. Those settings just don't seem to be perfect for underwater video, but one thing that is really cool is the slow-mo preset. The slow-mo preset shoots at a resolution of 1080p, so that's great, we discussed that, but it also shoots at 240 frames per second. And what that means, if we go back to our first example of editing and exporting at a 30 frames per second timeline, is now you're shooting at 240 frames per second. Divide 240 by 30, and that's 8. That means you can slow down your footage by 8 times if you're going to be using a regular timeline and a regular editing sequence. And that is super cool. You can imagine all the possibilities, a big shark tail waving very slowly. You can even speed up the footage and then stop it to 8 times slow and then speed it back up again. So you've got a lot of cool time ramping type editing capabilities. Now beyond that, you may want to create other custom presets. You may want to use the super view lens for something that's very wide and you want to get very close to it, like a shipwreck or a lot of divers or a big reef scene or a whale. Or maybe you want to use the linear lens because you want to shoot macro subjects with a Macromate diopter or a macro lens that goes over the GoPro to help you shoot those small subjects. Check out the description below. I've got links to a few cool macro lenses for the GoPro down there. The last few GoPro models have hyper-smooth image stabilization on there. So with the GoPro Hero 9, you're going to have hyper-smooth 3.0. Leave that on, leave that at high. It's really nice and really does a great job smoothing out your underwater video. There is a boost that you'll find if you start exploring the menu. I tend not to recommend the boost. Sure, it will help create even more stable footage, but now you're losing your field of view and cropping out some of the quality of the GoPro by reducing that field of view in the image. So use the image stabilization, use that hyper smooth, but don't put the boost on for most regular underwater video because you just don't need it. And last in this video tutorial are my pro tips. Now, the first thing you really need to do in shooting great underwater video with your GoPro is to keep it stable. So there are a number of different ways to hold your GoPro depending on what you're doing, what you're shooting, and how you're diving. Because you definitely don't want to be holding it like this. So let's move into that. Watch this. There we go. Now we got my tray and handle system. You probably saw this at the beginning of the video, but this is how I'd recommend holding your GoPro for anyone who is scuba diving or even free diving and looking for nice, smooth, even footage. The nice thing about this is you have two handles that keep the GoPro very stable as you're shooting your scene. So it helps to eliminate any of that shaky footage you might see on the very end of a long selfie pole or selfie stick or anything like that. As an added benefit, you have two ball mounts, so you can add different video arms and different video lights to really help light your scene, particularly if you're scuba diving and want that artificial light. So again, check out the description. I've got a number of links below of some cool handle and tray systems, as well as a whole buyer's guide on my website. Check that out, and let's look at the next way you want to hold your GoPro. Boom, presto, selfie stick. Now, I mentioned I'm not a huge fan of the selfie stick because oftentimes when you have the selfie stick extended, you're going to create wobbly footage because inherently the water's going to move the pole a little bit, your arm's going to move, the camera's so far away from you, it's just going to shake all over the place and you can't hold it steady. But what is really cool about certain selfie sticks is they automatically have built-in tripods. So put it on the ground, do some free diving passes right by it, which is pretty cool. Or what you can also do is extend the stick, and then you can start to shoot a little bit of selfie perspective as you're swimming, and that creates a really cool angle as you're scuba diving or free diving, getting that first person's perspective, or even holding it behind you and getting a bit of second person perspective. So that's really cool, that's really fun. Aside from those specific shooting situations, I probably wouldn't use a selfie stick all that much, but it's a good tool to have in the camera bag and something essential. Check out the links below again. And oh, this one's a lot harder, heavier, even without a camera in here. But you can also hold your GoPro on top of your housing. Now, this is called a cold shoe adapter. It's a ball mount that attaches to a clamp that then attaches to a GoPro mount. This one is made by Ultralight Control Systems, bomb-proof, really tough. All of this helps hold your camera or hold the GoPro camera on top of your camera. So if you're out there shooting still photos or whatever, you can tap, all of a sudden start recording video, and it makes it really easy to do cool stuff. You can flip it around and then start recording yourself as you're shooting and do other cool stuff. Sometimes it's just fun to have a second camera on top of your main camera system. So simply get these adapters and a clamp and then you're good to go. So that's pretty much it as basic settings for shooting underwater video with the GoPro. I'm going to be addressing photo settings and then some other tips and tricks, as well as showing some video from free diving, from scuba diving with the GoPro Hero 9. So stay tuned to the channel, subscribe if you haven't done that yet, and I will see you in future videos. Thanks for tuning in.